Let's listen to a bit of the audiobook. They went to work immediately documenting the company's structures, transactions, and conclusions. After a few hours, Amber pulled Jeff to a quiet corner of the room and said, "I found something you are not going to believe." "What?" "The companies I'm tracking were created after World War II in the late 1940s. "Wow. Do you think the people in control of these businesses have been working for the aliens since then?" "Jeff, these companies were formed by people who ran major arms companies in Germany and Japan." "What do you mean?" "Executives from those companies formed these companies." "Are you implying that the aliens were involved with Germany and Japan during World War II?" "I'm definitely saying they were influential people at that time. What if the aliens were trying to take over the world through military force by using Germany and Japan? When that failed, they reset their plans and helped humans develop the technology to build these factories."
So, Chris, do you also read human psychology? Like, how do you, in the book, how are you, how did you come across that? How to know others? How to actually different species that has come to, Earth, and how do we communicate with them, or how do we try to understand? So, is it based on some particular, psychology books that you have read, or shed some more light on that?
Yeah, well, being a manager at Intel for 25 years, so I figure if you're going to be good at managing something, you should understand it. If you're managing people, you need to understand people, right? So I did a lot of analysis of people, and people don't realize it, but when I talk with somebody, I try not to do any snap judgments. Some people do that. I don't like to. But what I can do is I kind of pick up on what's their behavioral type, and what are their motivations, and what are the things they like and dislike. And just through questions and interacting, you kind of build this kind of framework around people. Once because I've managed at one time or another over 1,000 people, right? Just over time, not all at once, but you just start to learn those patterns. And then when you've read enough about it. And I had managers like, I don't know if you remember Coca Yakely. She was very much into the people aspects. And she and I used to talk for hours just about people and the types of people and how they work together.
No, I do know, because, I was also fortunate enough to be, in a lot of the classes that we attended where, we would understand the, behaviors, the aspirations of people and all that. So, but beyond what we learned at Intel and applied at Intel, obviously there's a wealth of, learning there, but have you read other books on human psychology?
No, I haven't really gotten into I've read some Nietzsche, for example, just for the fun of it, because that guy's very entertaining.
More of philosophy, he's more of philosophy than human psychology,
but I haven't really read psychology books or followed people like that, no. But it's more so, if you're looking at a whole person, in a business environment, there's a psychology piece and motivation and,
No, I do read some of the psychology stuff like Jung and,
I know you do.
Articles. So, but, based on our experience and all that, I think, you have pretty good understanding of human behavior and aspirations, what triggers what, and, how people evolve. So, pretty good.
Oh, thank you.
So let me switch gears a little bit. So, so let's say today, if you want to, be known as an author, right? So, you are getting there by publishing books and all that. So would you prefer to be known as Heinlein, or, you mentioned Asimov you don't like, but Frank Herbert or Clark or somebody else? What's your benchmark? So what's the benchmark that you are trying to aspire to?
I like them all. What I was just saying is Asimov has great stories, but he wasn't a great writer, where Clark was a better writer. But, I never really picked somebody that I wanted to just emulate. I talked about Clive Cussler a little bit. There's a few aspects of the way he builds a story really fast that I liked. But, I've read just probably hundreds of different authors, and I didn't really aspire to be like any of them. I was just more so to tell a great story. And so I really kind of started off as, what would I like to see in a story? And so I tried to write a story that I would like, thinking that I'm, part of the demographic that I'm going after, which, I've gotten quite a few 5-star reviews and people saying, that they really liked it. I could do a little bit better work at marketing, which I've actually kind of figured out. I'm going to apply it to my next book when I launch it. Yeah, so I never really said, oh, I want to be like one of these guys, or I want to be a Hugo Award winner or anything. But, if I get there, that would be great.
Yeah, obviously, yes.
Yeah. Good. Yeah, because, when I obviously with the, same age group. So, Heinlein and Frank Herbert were the two that really, I like their writing style and, how they weave politics and philosophy and pragmatism and everything into a storyline. Arthur C. Clarke, obviously, you mentioned, and Asimov, same here. I like him. He writes, good stories, but, there's something that doesn't click, even with me on Asimov. So tell us more about, the current science fiction that you're reading, or, current books that, let's say, if you were to recommend, apart from your books, which are the other books that you would recommend to the reader, listeners or the readers or your friends and family?
Yeah, well, the stuff I write, I keep clean. So there's, some that have some interesting additional stuff. But Peter Hamilton has a really good series story out there. It starts with reality dysfunction. That's a really good one. And I like that whole series of books. So Ian Banks actually has a series where he has people who are like Marines in the future type of thing, and it's from their point of view. That one's pretty good in terms of more recent stuff I read. I also read some fantasy, and I read the Wheel of Time like twice because I just liked it so much. And of course, Game of Thrones. Gotta say, didn't like the end of the series, but the books are great, and I hope to see our friend Mr. Martin put out a couple more.
Yeah, but that goes more into the fantasy rather than science fiction, right?
Yeah.
So that's what I was talking about earlier. That these days, what I see is science fiction and fantasy is getting kind of into the same common stream,
like steampunk or something.
Yeah.
Do you see science fiction, the classic science fiction, as sort of on a downward trend compared to the more recent science fiction that is, incorporating a lot of dystopian society elements and a lot of technology? You use some technology, and it sounds like you're moving more in that direction. But what are your thoughts about more classic sci-fi?
Yeah, I mean, there would appear that there's basically less people writing in that way, which, that's fine. I think it's an evolution, right? And I think you are seeing a lot more stuff that's a blend between fantasy and sci-fi. Who was it? I think it was Clarke saying that any technology sufficiently advanced is indistinguishable from magic.
Magic, yes. Yeah.
So, there's kind of a fertile ground there, right? And I think part of it too, though, is that a lot of the people writing the classic sci-fi were really kind of visionary and looking out into the future about what would happen and have made many accurate projections, right? And, I never want to disparage any other authors, but maybe there's just less of them doing that homework, Or the ones that are maybe aren't as visible, to us, and they're out there somewhere. We've just got to find them.
Right.
Yeah, you may be right, actually, because, I think that these days it's more of marketing and promotions that, get attention rather than the actual material. Early days, when it was, very difficult to get a book published, it would automatically filter through, a lot of reviews and, and only come out if it is to a certain standard.
Yeah, and there's not a million being published every year, right?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I wonder if some of the more of that trend toward the dystopian society is indicative of lowered amount of hope for the for humanity.
Yeah.
Because it gets pretty dark.
Yeah. Well, there's people like my wife, for example. She really loves a story that's like an end of the world story, and she goes like, I don't know why, but I really like those stories. So it's not that there's lack of hope, but they just like that type of story, right? And if you think about it, you get a lot of emotion there because it's like the ultimate thing going on. So that'll connect with people. So I think part of it is what are people's preferences and so on, and again what Rajeev was saying, what's selling. But I think that's a really interesting question, is there is something about our psychology of saying that we're not as hopeful for the future as maybe we were 20 years ago.
Yeah.
I'm actually more hopeful when I look at all of the stuff and how fast we progress,
Yeah. I was going to say that.
Yeah, I was going to say that, maybe that dystopian future and all that instilled some, not hope, but some desire to actually do something to overcome that. And that itself becomes, the outcome becomes positive, that, when people see a lot of this, bleak future on the screen or read about it in the books, then they maybe unconsciously decide, hey, we are not going to, let it overcome us, and we will do something to change it. So who knows, maybe there's some reverse psychology going on in there.
Maybe so. I also thought it was really interesting, the choice to have the aliens being, controlling the humans, right? That and manipulating the humans through our maybe it's our greed, or maybe it's our desire for medical breakthroughs, or whatever those things about our flaws that make us susceptible to that manipulation. That what I found really interesting is that by taking it as a manipulation of the aliens, it feels like it makes it a little bit easier to look at those flaws and say, oh, not so much as to not own our issues, but as a way of looking at them as, oh, that's something that I don't need to give up, as I have no control over. It's like a reclaiming of our ability to actually be better people. So if I'm greedy, and then I look at this story of aliens controlling me through my greed, it's like, wait a minute, hold on.
Yeah.
I want to take that back. I want to reclaim the part of me that doesn't have to make that choice.
That's a great observation, because that is actually part of what I was trying to do, is for people to think of the consequences of what they're doing, and things are considered bad for a reason.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We label them negative traits for a reason.
Yeah, exactly. Because they actually have a negative consequence.
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts about humanity's destiny?
Well, I think at the end of the day, we have a destiny. We just haven't invented it yet, or finished inventing it yet. But if we look broadly about humanity and going out into the galaxy, beyond our solar system, even within our solar system, but when we go beyond our solar system and assuming that there is intelligent life out there and we just haven't found them yet, or they don't want to be found, or at least by us, that we can play a role. And we can play a role as a peacekeeper, or a partner, or, trading, brokering, negotiating, diplomat, or we could be, quite warlike, and we can be invading and conquering. And I think, there's enough duplicity in humanity and our governments and the way that we operate within segments and separate from each other, that you could have a lot of those things going on at the same time. But at the end of the day, one of the things I wrote in Colonizing Trappist is that races started to be known for the thing that they were good at, and they would start doing the thing in the. If you think of our global society, if we actually become a global society, people's skills will take them into the things that they're good at. Like what I used to do with the people that worked for me, I always looked for their strengths and had them work where their strengths were. If you do the same thing with races, there was this race, it's not too much of a spoiler, but they're called the Tavians. And essentially, they're psychic and they're great negotiators. And when you have two Tavians negotiating, so I have a Tavian working for me, you have one working for you, they both know what the other Tavian knows, because they actually are wide open telepathic. So they can't lie, and they can't hide, and they can't cheat. When they're negotiating a real deal, right? At least their understanding of a real deal. So that's where that race becomes a race of negotiators. Well, what would we become? We're very versatile, but I think we do have a lot of skills when we choose to use them around diplomacy, not just around warfare. Mm-hmm. We obviously do a lot around warfare as well. If you think of the races, like I have a race, that's actually a fungal race, right? So they're not very mobile. So they have to be within a container to move around, because they're actually a fungus, like a mushroom that lives in the ground, right? Versus we can move around and walk around. So who knows what kind of races there are out there, right? And I think a lot of our abilities will play out into what our role would be in that. We'll call it interstellar society. That's a ways off, but I think it's an interesting thing to think about. What would we want to do as a race?
It seems like there is an increasing movement and gathering of people around the UFOs and aliens and those topics and who's seen what and what are we experiencing. And it's become more mainstream, although not entirely, I don't think yet. But I find it interesting that we're seeing that movement in relation to, books like yours. But there's just a lot more attention, I think, and focus on what else is out there in the universe besides just humans. We're not the only ones here.
Yeah. So there's definitely the Fermi paradox, which is, when they did a calculation of how many intelligent species should be out there, we're not seeing them, or we're not seeing the signs we would expect to see. But that doesn't mean that there isn't intelligent life that's just not spacefaring life, right?
Yeah.
Like we wouldn't really be considered a spacefaring species since all we did is went to our own moon and we're gone 3 probes, right? Maybe we're in the infancy of that, right? I think there's an innate curiosity from human beings of what's beyond the next mountain, what's beyond the next ocean, what's beyond the next planet, what's beyond the solar system. So we've been able to gaze out, 17 billion light years out in the distance, or actually 14.8 billion light years out into the different distance. I was thinking of the 17 billion solar mass black hole that's out there that we found that's way, way out there.
Yeah.
So we're always curious and looking beyond the horizon. And I think when people think about the likelihood, when they really realize kind of what a kind of a small thing we really are in the grandness of our universe, that there must be somebody else out there. And so you get your imagination going. And so anything that talks about it is just going to fuel that imagination, which I think is great. I think we need to fuel our imaginations much more, than we do today.
Yeah.
So, so one of the things that, always comes to my mind whenever I read, these science fiction or even, see movies and all that. So we assume that the aliens will be something very different. But, what if they're exactly like us?
Yeah.
So, they have exactly the same fears. They have the same aspirations. They have the same limitations or, same.
Well, and do they have religion? Do they believe in God, right?
Yeah. So, maybe they're exactly like us. What then?
Yeah. Well, it'll be easier to get common ground.
I know. Well, hopefully, or we will, fragment the society even further.
Yeah, that would be interesting, but highly unlikely, just because of the chemistry of the planets when they form, right?
That's true. Yeah, you're right. Yeah. But
that would be funny, though.
It would be funny.
Well, then there is the multiverse, right? So you could say, okay, the aliens are actually in the other universes.
Yeah, exactly.
They're not like us; they are us.
Yeah.
And if we get to see the other version of us, that might be just terrifying in itself, right?
Yeah. Well, there's a science fiction show called what's it called? I forgot the name of it. It's on Netflix, where basically this is what's happening. The group of people are traveling between the multiverse versions, and they're kind of playing out this story. It's pretty interesting.
Oh, okay. No, I haven't watched it.
Well, so Chris, what's coming up for you next? What are you working on?
Well, I'm definitely, first off, working on my next book, which is Earth 0 Hour. So it's the second book in the Zalthuras series. And it's essentially after we've kind of had this initial encounter with the Zalthurians, who are the alien race that was influencing us and trying to kill about 5 billion of us. Basically, I won't say too much more, but they return and there's a huge conflict. And it's going to be a lot of really cool technology, some really good characters. Definitely, again, not too much of a spoiler, but, just because they're a main character doesn't mean they always live. So I've also been working with my book publishing coach, Patrick Snow, and so we actually have put together a whole class to basically teach people how to create and publish books, how to market them, and how to use them if they're nonfiction to be a speaker, coach, or consultant, or if it's fiction, basically the right way to go about crafting your book so that it sells and you can market it, makes it marketable, as well as doing the marketing. Oh, also, the latest thing I've been doing is I've started a service for authors. The idea is that authors need a platform to be able to communicate their books to the world. So I have a web development company. It's called Folsom Digital Marketing. And Folsom Digital Marketing, I have a service called Author Platform. And the idea is that we do everything from creating your website, creating your sales funnels, your online classes, autoresponders, affiliate programs, kind of the whole 9 yards, to basically take your information empire and put it online.
That's great. That's great. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
We'll make sure that we put that information in the show notes.
All right. And in addition to that, I volunteered as a docent at the Placerville Observatory. So if you go to Google and say Placerville Observatory, if you're ever there in California, come on by. So it's basically open at 8:30 p.m. on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, if the weather's right and the clouds are good. So I've got to use the 17-inch Newtonian reflector. We've got a 15-inch with a camera, so we can do multiple images and stack them. So I was actually showing people just last weekend the Needle Galaxy and the Regan Galaxy, and some of the other Messier objects, as well as Jupiter's very visible right now. So we've got some nice views of Jupiter. Saturn's coming up over the horizon, so pretty soon we'll be able to see that. Where we're located, there's a tree right where the planets orbit, so we have to wait until they're high enough over the tree for the time window that we're open, right? But, there's just a lot of cool stuff like that.
That's great. Peering out into the universe seems like a good source of inspiration for your writing.
Yeah, it's fun. And I get to talk to a group of people there, and talk with people about our place in the universe and what a huge universe we have. And it's pretty amazing when the guy's going, well, how long is a light year? It's like, well, it's over 5 trillion miles. Yeah. That's one light. The closest star is 4 light years away.
Yeah. Yes.
That's quite a frequent flyer program if you could get on it.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Great. Well, we'll make sure that we put the information that you gave about the Patrick Snow program in the show notes so that people can get that information about that, and also ways to connect with you on your website. And just to remind everyone, this is Chris Shockowitz with the book Silent Invasion, and Rajeev Nanda. Thank you so much, for also an author. Thank you for joining us today and generating this awesome conversation.
Well, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us for Audiobook Connection, behind the scenes with the creative teams. You can visit us at audiobookconnection.com to learn more. The podcast is sponsored by Pro Audio Voices, helping great stories come alive through audiobook production and marketing. Learn more at proaudiovoices.com. Again, thanks for being with us, and please join us for our next episode of Audiobook Connection.
This podcast is a part of the C-Suite Radio Network. For more top business podcasts, visit c-suiteradio.com.